Harold Kane had worked as a janitor on orbital station EOS for almost 15 years. Every corridor, every maintenance hatch, every quiet corner of the massive station felt familiar to him. He knew which floors hummed louder at night, which air vents rattled when the temperature shifted, and which lights flickered just before needing replacement. To most people, he was invisible. To Harold, the station was alive. He took pride in his work. While others rushed past, eyes locked on wrist screens and schedules, Harold noticed things. A stain on a wall that appeared only during high humidity. A faint vibration under the metal floor that meant a filter was clogging. Small details mattered to him. They always had. Children especially seemed to notice him. Maybe it was because he always smiled at them. Or maybe because he spoke to them like people, not problems. Parents were often tired, busy with station life, but Harold had time. He would wave, ask simple questions, and sometimes explain how the station worked in easy words. He never crossed lines. He never needed to. On the day everything changed, Harold was cleaning the central promenade. It was one of the busiest areas of the station, filled with shops, artificial trees, and long glass panels that showed the stars outside. The floor had just been polished, and warning lights blinked softly to signal that it might be slippery. A little girl, no older than 7, ran ahead of her mother, laughing as her shoes squeaked on the clean surface. Harold saw it happen in a second. Her foot slid. She windmilled her arms, eyes wide. Without thinking, Harold stepped forward and gently caught her wrist to steady her. It was brief, light, and careful. The girl didn't fall. She laughed again, more from surprise than fear. "Careful there," Harold said kindly. "Floor's a bit smooth today." The girl nodded, still smiling, and ran back to her mother. That should have been the end of it, but the mother had seen only the moment, not the intent. She turned sharply, her expression hard. She pulled her daughter close and stared at Harold with suspicion. "Don't touch my child," she said loudly. People nearby slowed. Some stopped, eyes turned. "I was just stopping her from falling," Harold said calmly. His voice was steady, but his chest felt tight. "There are protocols," the woman said. "You don't put your hands on someone else's child." "I understand," Harold replied. "I'm sorry if it seemed wrong." Security arrived within minutes. The station was efficient that way. Too efficient. Harold was escorted away as people whispered. Some looked confused. Others looked judgmental. No one asked him what happened. By the end of the cycle, Harold was suspended pending investigation. He returned to his small quarters in silence. The room felt colder than usual. For the first time in years, he didn't know what to do with his hands. Cleaning had always given his days shape. Without it, time stretched strangely. That night, he couldn't sleep. He replayed the moment again and again. The girl slipping, his hand reaching out. The brief contact. Something else kept returning to his mind, something odd. When he had touched the girl's wrist, he had felt a faint warmth, not from skin, but like a soft vibration. Almost like a gentle pulse. He had noticed a shimmer too. Barely visible. Like light bending for a split second. At the time, he had dismissed it as stress or imagination. Now, he wasn't so sure. The next day, Harold stayed in public areas he was still allowed to access. He didn't clean. He observed. Without his duties, he had time to notice things more deeply. He began to see patterns he had never connected before. In certain corridors, the air felt cleaner, fresher, even when filters were overdue. Some walls had a faint glow, not from lights, but from something under the surface. People passed by without noticing. Harold leaned closer to one wall near a childcare center. The glow intensified slightly, responding to his presence. He frowned, curious. Later, near the promenade where the incident happened, he saw it again. Tiny points of light, almost like dust, drifting slowly in the air. They were faint, visible only at the edge of vision. When people hurried past, the lights dimmed. When someone slowed, laughed, or spoke gently, the lights brightened. Harold's heart beat faster. He remembered the girl's wrist. the warmth, the shimmer. Over the next few days, he quietly tested his observations. He stood near stressed workers, arguing over schedules. The lights faded. He sat near a group of children drawing on a digital pad, their laughter soft and genuine. The lights bloomed like stars. No alarms triggered. No sensors reacted. The station's advanced systems seemed blind to it all. Only Harold saw. One afternoon, he spotted the little girl again. Lila, walking with her mother. This time, Harold kept his distance. He watched carefully. The lights around Lila were stronger than around anyone else. They clung close to her skin, like a second invisible layer. She stopped suddenly and looked straight at him. For a moment, Harold thought he imagined it, but she smiled and waved. He raised his hand slightly in return, careful not to move closer. The lights around her pulsed, brighter than before. Her mother noticed nothing. Harold understood then that whatever this was, it wasn't random. It wasn't dangerous. It was responsive. Alive. Maybe. That evening, Harold reviewed old maintenance logs in his personal console. As a janitor, he had access to many archived reports. He searched for unexplained system corrections, self-healing materials, air quality improvements without logged causes. There were hundreds, all ignored, all marked as acceptable variants. Harold felt a mix of awe and sadness. The station had been quietly helping itself, reacting to the people inside it, and no one had noticed because they weren't looking. And now, because he had looked, because he had acted without hesitation to help a child, he had lost his job. But for the first time since the suspension, Harold didn't feel small. He felt responsible. He sat on his bunk, staring at his hands. The same hands that cleaned, repaired, and cared. The same hands now labeled a problem. They missed it, he said softly to the empty room. All of it. Outside his small window, the station glowed against the stars. Not just metal and circuits, but something more. Something quietly alive. Harold knew this was only the beginning. Harold Kane woke early, even though he no longer had a shift to report to. His body still remembered routine. The soft hum of the station filled his room, steady and calm, like a slow breath. He sat up and looked at his hands again. They looked the same as always. Rough from years of cleaning, small scars from honest work. Yet now he knew Fletcher touched more than dirt and metal. They touched something unseen. He spent the morning walking the lower corridors, places few people visited unless something broke. These areas were quiet, almost forgotten. The lights there were dimmer, and the walls showed signs of age. Harold moved slowly, watching carefully. The tiny lights were there too. They floated close to the walls, drifting like lazy sparks. When Harold stepped closer, they reacted. Not quickly, not sharply, but gently, like something waking from rest. The air felt warmer, cleaner. He reached out, stopping just short of touching the wall. The lights gathered. Harold pulled his hand back, surprised. He smiled without meaning to. "So you see me," he whispered. The lights pulsed once, faint but clear. He didn't touch again. He didn't want to rush. Whatever this was, it deserved care. He sat on the floor instead, his back against the wall, breathing slowly. The lights remained, calm and steady. For the first time since his suspension, Harold felt useful again. Over the next few days, Harold continued his quiet observations. He learned patterns. The lights were strongest near children, gardeners, caregivers, and service workers. They were weakest near loud arguments, rushed meetings, and stressed crowds. It wasn't anger that pushed them away. It was disconnection. People stopped noticing each other, and the lights faded. Technology didn't seem to matter. Advanced tools, powerful systems, none of them affected the lights at all. Only people did. Harold realized something important. The lights were not reacting to status, intelligence, or authority. They reacted to attention, to care, to simple presence. He thought about his years as a janitor, How often he had talked to the station like it could hear him. How he thanked doors that finally opened and apologized to machines when they failed. Maybe he hadn't been talking to metal. Maybe he had been talking to this. One afternoon, Harold noticed a change. The lights in one section of the station flickered weakly, almost disappearing. This area housed several environmental control units. Normally, the air there was crisp and balanced. Now it felt dry, uncomfortable. People passed through quickly, frowning, checking their wrist screens, complaining quietly. Harold followed the trail of fading lights until he reached a sealed maintenance door. He recognized it immediately. It hadn't been opened in years. He accessed the panel with his old clearance code. To his surprise, it still worked. Inside, the room was filled with dust and silent machines. Filters clogged long ago, yet no alarm had ever sounded. The lights hovered weakly above the broken systems, scattered and thin. Harold stepped inside and closed the door behind him. He didn't touch the machines at first. He just stood there, breathing, calming his thoughts. He remembered how he used to work, slowly and carefully, never rushing repairs. The lights gathered closer. Only then did he begin to clean. He didn't use power tools. He didn't rush. He wiped surfaces by hand, replaced filters manually, checked seals the old way. As he worked, the lights brightened. They moved smoothly, flowing along the walls, settling into the machines. When he finished, the room felt different, balanced, alive. The lights glowed strong and steady. Harold left quietly, locking the door behind him. Within hours, the environmental systems corrected themselves. Reports marked the improvement as another, acceptable variance. No one questioned it. That night, Harold couldn't stop thinking about Lila. The girl seemed special, not because she was a child, but because she noticed things too. She had looked at the lights without fear. Without doubt, he saw her again 2 days later near the artificial gardens. This time, he stayed seated on a bench, hands folded clearly in view. He did not move toward her. Lila noticed him immediately. She tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mama, the light man is there." Her mother frowned. "Don't point." "But he sees them," Lila said. Her mother froze. "Sees what?" "The soft lights," Lila replied simply. Harold's breath caught. The woman turned slowly, looking around. "There's nothing there." Lila shook her head. "They're around him, and around me." Her mother looked uncomfortable now. "Lila, we talked about pretending." "I'm not pretending," Lila said, her voice calm. Harold stood slowly, keeping distance. "She's not pretending," he said gently. "Some people just notice more." The mother stiffened. "You," Harold nodded. "I won't come closer. I just wanted to say your daughter has a good eye." Lila smiled brightly. The lights around her shimmered, brighter than ever. Her mother looked between them, confused. She didn't see the lights, but she saw something else. Calm. No threat. Just honesty. "We should go," she said finally. Lila waved. Harold waved back, slowly. That evening, Harold made a decision. If the station was alive in its own way, if it responded to care, then ignoring it was dangerous. Not immediately, not loudly, but slowly, like forgetting to water a plant. He began recording what he saw. Not with advanced scanners, but with simple notes. Times, places, emotional states, environmental responses. He noticed that whenever people worked together calmly, systems performed better. Whenever people isolated themselves behind screens, the lights dimmed. Humans, Harold realized, were not just passengers. They were part of the system. A week later, Harold received a message. Station administration requested his presence for a review update. He felt nervous, but not afraid. When he entered the office, the same administrator who had suspended him sat behind a clean desk, expression neutral. "Mr. Kane," she said, "we've reviewed the incident." Harold nodded, hands relaxed at his sides. "Your suspension remains," she continued. "However, we've noticed something unusual." She brought up a display. environmental metrics, air quality spikes, self-corrections, all linked to areas Harold had visited. These improvements coincide with your movements, she said. Do you have an explanation? Harold took a breath. Yes, he said simply. But you're not going to like how simple it is. The administrator raised an eyebrow. Harold looked past her, toward the wall. The lights were there. Faint but present. He smiled. Everyone's been missing it, he said. Harold sat in the small meeting room alone for several minutes after the administrator left. The door had closed softly, but the silence felt heavy. He knew what he had said sounded strange. Simple things often did. People trusted complexity more than truth. He stood and placed his hand near the wall. The faint lights drifted closer. Calm and patient. They did not rush. They never rushed. Let's see if they're ready, Harold whispered. Later that day, the administrator returned, this time with 2 engineers and a behavioral analyst. Their faces showed curiosity mixed with doubt. They sat across from Harold, screens glowing softly in front of them. You claim the station responds to human presence, one engineer said. Not commands. Not systems. People. Yes. Harold replied. Not just presence. Care. Attention. Calm. The analyst leaned forward. That sounds emotional, not scientific. Harold nodded. It is emotional. That doesn't make it false. The administrator raised a hand. Show us. They moved to a quiet corridor near the environmental control wing. Harold chose the location carefully. The lights were weak there, almost invisible. The air felt dry. Observe, Harold said. The engineers scanned the area. Air quality slightly below standard, one said. No alerts. Harold stepped forward slowly. He breathed deeply, calming his thoughts. He didn't think about proving anything. He thought about helping. About balance. The lights began to gather. At first, no one else noticed. Then one engineer frowned. Do you see that? He asked. The analyst leaned closer. Light refraction? The lights grew brighter, still soft, never sharp. The air shifted. The dryness eased. Sensors chimed quietly. Air quality improving, the engineer said, stunned. No system input detected. Harold stepped back. The lights slowly dispersed, but they did not vanish. Silence filled the corridor. The administrator exhaled. How long have you known? Only a little while, Harold said. But it's been happening a long time. They returned to the meeting room. This time, no one dismissed him. Over the next few days, Harold was allowed limited access under observation. Not as a janitor, not officially. Just as himself, he guided small experiments. No touching people. No direct contact with children. He was careful. Always careful. They learned quickly. The lights reacted strongest when people worked together calmly. Arguments didn't make them disappear. But rushing did. Ignoring did. The station didn't punish stress. It simply responded to connection. One engineer, quiet and thoughtful, noticed something important. The lights are not fixing things, she said. They're guiding systems back to balance. Like a memory. Harold smiled. That's what janitors do, he said. We don't redesign. We maintain. Word spread quietly among staff. Not rumors. Observations. The station felt better in certain areas. People felt calmer, without knowing why. Lila became part of the discovery without meaning to. She often sat in the gardens, drawing shapes in the air with her fingers. The lights followed her movements, weaving gentle patterns. Harold always stayed at a respectful distance. He spoke to her mother more often now. Slowly. Carefully. Trust grew like a plant. Not a switch. Why can she see them? Her mother asked one day. Harold thought for a moment. Because she hasn't learned to stop looking, the woman nodded, understanding more than she said. As weeks passed, the administration faced a choice. They could hide the discovery, control it, turn it into a system. or they could accept that it could not be owned. Harold made his position clear. The moment you try to command it, he said, it will fade. They tested that too. Controlled environments, forced emotional responses. The lights dimmed every time. The conclusion was clear. Humans were not masters here. They were partners. One evening, Harold stood alone in the promenade where everything had begun. The floor gleamed softly. People moved calmly, not because they were told to, but because the space felt right. The lights drifted gently above, almost playful now. Harold felt a presence beside him. It was the administrator. You were wronged, she said quietly. Harold shook his head. No. People reacted with fear. That happens. You lost your job. I found something bigger, he replied. She smiled faintly. We want to reinstate you. Harold looked at the lights, then back at her. As what? She paused. As a caretaker. Harold nodded. That's all I've ever been. The station hummed softly, steady and alive, as if agreeing. Harold Kane returned to work without fanfare. There was no announcement, no public apology, no speech in the promenade. His name simply appeared again on the internal access lists, this time with a new title that few people understood. Caretaker. It sounded small. Harold liked that. He wore the same simple uniform, though it was cleaner now, freshly issued. The fabric felt strange on his skin at first, but his steps fell into an old rhythm. The station greeted him the way it always had, with a low hum and steady lights. Only now, he saw more. The soft lights were everywhere. They drifted along walls, hovered near vents, rested in corners where people paused to breathe. They were brighter than before, not because the station had changed, but because more people were slowing down without knowing why. Harold's work was not written in schedules. He walked, observed, and listened. When a space felt tense, he stayed longer. When systems felt strained, he sat nearby and breathed calmly. He spoke kindly to tired workers, thanked cleaners, smiled at children. The lights responded every time. The engineers documented everything. They measured air quality, energy flow, system efficiency. All of it improved. Slowly but steadily. No upgrades. No new machines, just people. At first, the administration wanted rules, guidelines, training programs. Harold advised against it. You can't teach attention by command, he said. It has to be invited. They listened. Not because he was important, but because the station itself seemed to agree. Lila continued to visit the gardens often. She and Harold developed a quiet routine. She would sit and draw, and Harold would sit a few benches away. Never closer. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. The lights danced between them, gentle and curious. One day, Lila asked, "Do the lights like the station?" Harold smiled. "I think they are the station. Or part of it. Do they like people?" she asked. "They don't like or dislike," he said after thinking. "They respond." Lila nodded, satisfied. Her mother watched from a distance, no longer afraid. She had seen enough. The station felt safer now. Not because of stricter rules, but because people were more present. Word spread beyond EOS station. Other stations reported similar unexplained improvements. Investigators came. They asked questions. They brought advanced tools. The lights faded around them. Harold explained gently. "You're trying to capture something that only appears when it's not hunted." Some listened. Some didn't. One visiting official scoffed. "So the solution is kindness?" Harold met his gaze calmly. "It's attention. Kindness is just one form of it." The official left unconvinced. His station saw no change. Months passed. The story didn't become a headline. There were no dramatic revelations. Just steady improvement, quiet understanding. Harold's old suspension was never mentioned again. The incident faded into memory, replaced by something larger. People no longer saw him as the man who made a mistake. They saw him as the man who noticed. Late one cycle, Harold stood at the observation window, watching the stars drift past. The lights gathered around him, brighter than ever. They reflected softly in the glass, like distant constellations. He thought about how close everything had come to being missed, how easily fear could have erased discovery, how often people looked without seeing. Humans, he realized, had a rare gift. Not strength, not speed, not intelligence alone. Attention. They could notice. They could care. They could become part of systems larger than themselves, without needing to control them. The station thrived because humans were willing, finally, to listen. Harold placed his hand near the glass. Not touching, just close. The lights pulsed gently. Like a quiet thank you, he smiled, content. Tomorrow, he would walk the corridors again. He would clean when needed. He would sit when needed. He would notice what others still missed. And that, he knew, was enough.